The corrugated steel walls of the workshop hummed faintly as wind pushed through the cracks, carrying the smell of dust and old machine oil. A single overhead bulb swung lazily, throwing shadows that danced across racks of tools and broken weapon parts. At the center of it all, seated at a scarred oak table, she worked in silence. The Barrett M82 lay before her like an altar piece, its massive frame demanding reverence. Her hands moved with the patience of ritual, dragging a clean strip of cloth down the length of the receiver, catching grime, metal dust. The faint film left from a past mission. Every pass of the cloth seemed to pull her deeper into memory. She didn't just clean the weapon. She restored it, breathed it back to purpose. The cool steel reflected her eyes, sharp and unblinking. Outside, a dog barked, a truck coughed to life, but none of it reached her. The only sounds that mattered were the low scrape of metal and the soft exhale of her breath. The Barrett was no ordinary rifle. Its weight told a story. Its recoil remembered every battle. She traced a finger over the custom etching at the base of the barrel, the emblem hidden from casual notice, a skeletal hawk with talons wrapped around a single bullet. The Deadeye Division. The mark had been seared into her comrades' gear, stitched into their blood. Most people had never heard of it. That was by design. To carry that symbol meant you lived outside the official record, and most who bore it never lived long enough to retire. She was an exception, but the exception had come at a price. She paused, leaning back in her chair, rolling the cloth in her hand. For years she had avoided places like this, rooms filled with ghosts of war, the weight of duty pressing down through the tools of violence. Yet here she was unable to let go. Her eyes closed for a moment, and in the dark behind her eyelids she saw flashes, dust storms on foreign soil, the kick of the Barrett in her shoulder, the muffled cries of comrades who would never make it home. Her hand returned to the weapon, steady again, as if repetition could calm the storm inside. Each wipe of the cloth was an oath renewed, a promise that one day the rifle would speak again, and when it did, it would not miss. Bootsteps cut through the stillness like the ticking of a metronome, steady and unhurried, announcing the arrival of someone who knew he belonged anywhere he walked. She didn't flinch, didn't look up from the Barrett sprawled across the table. The rhythm of her hands didn't change. Whoever it was would have to earn her attention. The figure stepped into the pool of light beneath the swinging bulb. A Navy SEAL colonel, broad-shouldered and carved from years of command, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, his eyes sharp as if even in this forgotten corner of the world he expected to be tested. He took in the workshop in a single sweep. Walls lined with racks of rusted equipment, the lingering stink of gun oil, the faint glitter of brass casings scattered across the floor. His gaze settled on the rifle, then on her. Something flickered in his expression, a recognition that froze him mid-step. He moved closer, slower now, as though approaching a relic. His hand hovered near the weapon, but didn't touch. He bent low, eyes narrowing at the etching just above the receiver. A skeletal hawk, wings stretched, talons gripping a single bullet. The colonel's throat tightened. He'd seen that insignia only once before, in a classified dossier he wasn't supposed to read. It had been attached to missions whispered about in briefing rooms, operations that officially never happened but were remembered in hushed tones by those who'd lost men to the shadows. The Deadeye Division, he murmured, almost to himself. The words carried a weight that settled over the workshop like smoke. His voice, roughened by years of shouting orders over gunfire, cracked ever so slightly. That mark hasn't been seen in 15 years. Her hand stilled on the rifle, the cloth draped loosely in her grip. Slowly, she raised her eyes to him. Calm, unwavering, but behind them something sharp glinted, an edge honed by survival. The silence stretched between them, charged, as though the past had suddenly clawed its way into the present. The colonel straightened, his jaw set. For the first time in a long while, he felt the prickle of unease. Standing before him wasn't just a woman tending to a weapon. She was a ghost made flesh, a survivor from a division erased from history, carrying secrets that could change the shape of whatever war lay ahead. And he knew, in that instant, nothing about this meeting was an accident. Rifle lying between them. No flinch, no hesitation. She had the look of someone who'd stared down both the enemy and the void and decided neither had the right to take her. The cloth in her hand hung loose, forgotten, as she let the silence draw him in like a predator waiting for prey to step closer. "You know the mark," she said finally, her voice low, even, each word measured like the squeeze of a trigger. Baconnell's jaw worked before he answered. "I know enough. The Deadeye Division wasn't supposed to exist." He shifted his weight, squaring his shoulders as if bracing against an invisible wind. "And everyone I ever heard tied to it ended up in the ground." Her eyes didn't leave his, but a ghost of something. Bitterness, sorrow, maybe even pride, flickered there. Most of them did. "We were designed to burn bright and fast, leave nothing behind but results. Names erased. Records destroyed. We were shadows that disappeared when the mission ended." She let out a short, humorless breath. "Except I never disappeared." The Connell studied her in silence. He saw the calm discipline of a soldier, but also the fracture lines of someone who carried too many ghosts. He realized then she wasn't just surviving. She was enduring. Every day a choice to keep breathing when she had been engineered to die in service. "They buried you with the others," he said quietly. "Officially, you don't exist." Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper, almost a warning. "That's the way they wanted it. A weapon doesn't need a name." She leaned forward, resting her palm flat on the cold steel of the Barrett. "But a weapon remembers. I remember every mile, every mission, every shot. I remember the faces of those who didn't come back. And I remember who gave the orders." The Connell felt the words like a blade slipped under his armor. He understood now this wasn't chance. Fate hadn't dropped him into a dusty workshop with a relic from a ghost unit. She was still carrying the weight of the Deadeye Division, still tied to the missions the world had chosen to forget. For the first time, he didn't see just a survivor. He saw a force waiting to be unleashed. A legend written in silence and blood, still very much alive. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black folder, its edges worn from too many hands that weren't supposed to touch it. Without a word, he slid it across the scarred table. The dossier's weight heavy against the wood. The cloth in her hand dropped, forgotten, as she studied the folder like it might be a trap. She didn't open it right away. Instead, her gaze lifted to meet his, sharp and unblinking. "What game are you playing?" "Connell." "No game," he said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "A mission. One nobody else can pull off." Her fingers finally pried open the folder. Inside, glossy photos stared back cartel lieutenants with shark smiles, mercenary captains armed to the teeth, corporate warlords in silk suits who looked more dangerous than the soldiers they paid. Each face had a red slash drawn through it, and at the bottom of every page were notes in cold military shorthand. Kill counts, territories controlled, assets untouchable by law or politics. "They're ghosts in their own right," he said, leaning on the table. "Protected by money. By governments that look the other way, by armies bought and paid for. Official channels can't touch them. But unofficially." He let the thought trail off, letting her fill the silence with possibility. She flipped through the pages with practiced detachment, but her eyes betrayed her. They lingered on certain faces, the kind tied to atrocities she had witnessed firsthand. The silence stretched until finally she closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. "You're asking me to go hunting again." I'm asking you to do what you were born to do, the colonel said firmly. I've put together a team, men and women who've all been cast aside, written off, just like you. But none of them can see through a mile of dust and drop a target like a hammer. None of them are Deadeye. The word hung in the air like a challenge. She leaned back, studying him with that same unnerving calm. Her fingers brushed the Barrett stock, tapping lightly as if weighing the rhythm of her own heartbeat. "What makes you think I'd say yes?" she asked. "Because," the colonel said, locking eyes with her, "you're still here, cleaning a rifle meant for war. And people like us, we don't hold onto our weapons unless we're waiting for the next fight." Room thick with the weight of unspoken truths. The colonel's words settled into the silence like embers finding dry brush. Her hand lingered on the Barrett, fingertips pressed against the cold steel as though the weapon itself was listening. For years she had tried to bury it, to treat it like a relic of another life, but the truth was undeniable. She had never stopped being what they made her. The rifle was not a memory. It was a promise. With a deliberate motion, she reached for the magazine resting beside the receiver. The sound of it sliding into place echoed like a verdict, the sharp click reverberating through the workshop. Her movements were clean, precise, carrying the muscle memory of countless reloads in deserts, jungles, ruined cities. She seated the weapon across her lap and looked up at him, eyes narrowed not with doubt, but with the cold calculation of a soldier deciding when to act. "One shot," she said finally, her voice as steady as the steel she cradled. "That's all it takes. One shot to bring a ghost back into the fight." The colonel nodded once, the faintest hint of relief crossing his hardened features. But it wasn't triumph. He knew what it meant to call someone like her back into the fold. It wasn't just about adding another gun to his team. It was about unleashing something the world had deliberately tried to erase, something that would not stop once it began moving again. He extended his hand across the table. She glanced at it, then back to his face. Slowly, she set the Barrett down with reverence, as if placing a blade back into its sheath. Her hand met his, firm, unyielding. The shake wasn't just agreement. It was an oath, silent but absolute. For a heartbeat, the workshop seemed to breathe with them, the shadows pressing closer as though bearing witness. She pulled her hand back and slung the rifle over her shoulder, the weight familiar, almost comforting. For the first time in years her lips curved, not into a smile, but into a razor-thin line of resolve. The colonel straightened, recognizing the shift. She was no longer just a survivor haunted by the past. She was a weapon choosing to fight again. And from that moment forward, they both knew another legend had joined the Expendables.